The morning sun blazed over the rocky hills of Afghanistan as Team 7 prepared for what their commander called a routine reconnaissance mission. Lieutenant Jake checked his gear one last time, running through the mental checklist that had kept him alive through 3 tours of duty. His team of 8 Navy SEALs had worked together for 2 years, and they moved like a well-oiled machine. "New guys coming with us today," announced to his squad. The men looked up from their equipment checks with curiosity. Getting a new team member was always a big deal in the SEALs. Trust wasn't something you earned overnight in this brotherhood. Alex stepped forward, his gear perfectly organized and his uniform crisp. At 24, he looked younger than most of the battle-hardened warriors around him. His Asian features were calm and focused, but noticed something different in his eyes. There was a sharpness there, like a blade that had been tested in fire. "It's our new sniper," explained. "Fresh out of advanced training his scores were off the charts." The team nodded respectfully but could see the questions in their faces. Scores on a range were one thing, real combat was something entirely different. Sergeant Mike, the team's veteran explosives expert, walked over too. "Welcome to the sandbox, rookie. Stay close, keep your mouth shut, and try not to get us all killed." His tone was gruff but not unkind. Every new guy got the same treatment. The mission briefing was simple enough. Intelligence had reported possible Taliban movement in a valley about 15 miles northeast of their base. Team 7's job was to get in, observe, and report back. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. The brass wanted information, not a firefight. As they loaded into the helicopter, found himself sitting next to Tommy Williams, the team's medic. Williams had been with the SEALs for 5 years and had seen more action than most soldiers saw in a lifetime. His hands bore small scars from shrapnel, and his left shoulder carried a bullet wound that still bothered him in cold weather. "First time in country?" Williams asked over the roar of the helicopter blades. Nodded. "First deployment anywhere, actually." Williams studied him for a moment. "You seem calm for a newbie. Most guys are either throwing up or talking nonstop on their first ride out." "I spent a lot of time preparing," replied simply. What he didn't mention was the hundreds of hours he'd spent in meditation, learning to control his breathing and calm his mind. His grandfather had taught him these techniques as a child, though the old man had never imagined they'd be used in war. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris. Team 7 moved out immediately, following a planned route through the rugged terrain. Found himself in the middle of the formation with taking point and watching their rear. The weight of his sniper rifle felt comfortable on his back, like an extension of his body. For 3 hours, they moved through the mountains without incident. The landscape was both beautiful and deadly, with hidden caves and rocky outcroppings that could shelter enemies or provide perfect ambush points. Training had taught him to read terrain like a book, but seeing it in person was different. Every shadow could hide danger. They reached their observation point just before noon, set up the team in a defensive position overlooking the valley below. Through their binoculars, they could see a small village nestled between 2 hills. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and children played in the dusty streets. It looked peaceful, almost innocent. "Doesn't look like much Taliban activity to me," whispered Danny Foster, the team's communications specialist. He was adjusting his radio equipment, making sure they maintained contact with base. Kept studying the village through his scope. Something felt wrong, though he couldn't put his finger on what. After 12 years in the military, he'd learned to trust his instincts. They'd saved his life more times than he could count. "Set up your rifle," ordered. "I want overwatch on that village. Something's not right down there." Quickly assembled his weapon, a state-of-the-art rifle that could reach targets at incredible distances. He found a comfortable position behind a large rock and adjusted his scope. Through the powerful lens, he could see details that were invisible to the naked eye. That's when he spotted them. "Sir," whispered urgently, "I've got armed men moving through the buildings on the south side of the village. They're using the civilians as cover." Moved to his position and looked through his own binoculars. Sure enough, he could now see what had spotted. Men in traditional Afghan clothing, but carrying AK-47 rifles and moving with military precision. They weren't villagers. "How many?" asked. Studied the area carefully. "At least 20, maybe more. They're setting up positions around the village. Looks like they're preparing for something." Crawled over to join them. "Could be waiting for us. Intel might have been wrong about this being a quiet sector." Before anyone could respond, Foster's radio crackled to life. Team 7, this is base. We've got reports of a convoy heading your way. 3 vehicles, armed hostiles. They should reach your position in about 30 minutes. His jaw tightened. They were caught between the armed men in the village and whatever was coming up the mountain road. It was a perfect trap, and they'd walked right into it. Options, asked his team. Williams checked his medical supplies. We could pull back now, try to reach the extraction point before they surround us. Shook his head. Too late for that. They probably have spotters on the high ground already. We move now and they'll cut us to pieces. Foster was still monitoring radio traffic. Base is asking for our status. They want to know if we need immediate extraction. Looked at his men. Each one was a trained killer, capable of handling himself in any situation. But they were outnumbered at least 4 to 1, possibly more. The smart move would be to call for help and try to hold their position until rescue arrived. Said quietly, "What's your range to those positions in the village?" Calculated quickly, "About 800 meters, well within my effective range." "Can you take out their leaders without alerting the others?" Studied the target area through his scope again. The armed men were spread throughout the village, but he could identify what looked like command positions. Taking them out would create chaos and confusion, giving Team 7 a chance to escape or engage on better terms. "I can try, sir, but once I fire the first shot, they'll know exactly where we are." Weighed their options. Stay hidden and hope the convoy passed by without spotting them. Try to withdraw and risk being caught in the open, or take the fight to the enemy on their terms. Williams Foster ordered, "Set up a defensive perimeter. You take out as many of their leaders as you can. We'll cover your withdrawal." Adjusted his rifle and controlled his breathing. Through his scope, he could see a man who appeared to be giving orders to the others. The distance was challenging, but not impossible. He'd made shots like this hundreds of times in training. His finger found the trigger and he began to apply pressure slowly and steadily. Everything his instructors had taught him came flooding back. Control your breathing, focus on the target, don't jerk the trigger. Just as he was about to fire, something caught his attention in his peripheral vision. Movement on the ridge above them. He shifted his scope slightly and felt his blood run cold. 3 men with rocket-propelled grenades were setting up positions directly above Team 7. They had the high ground and enough firepower to wipe out the entire squad in seconds. Somehow, they'd managed to get into position without being detected. Had a choice to make: take the shot he'd been ordered to take or shift to this new threat. Either way, his position would be compromised and the team would be in a firefight for their lives. He looked at who was still focused on the village below. The lieutenant had no idea that death was positioned directly above them. In a few seconds, those RPGs would turn their rocky position into a killing zone. Made his decision. He swung his rifle toward the ridge above and found his target. The man with the RPG was just shouldering his weapon, preparing to fire down at the SEAL team. Crosshairs centered on the man's chest. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and 800 meters away, the Taliban fighter dropped his weapon and fell backward. But wasn't done. He worked the bolt quickly and shifted to the second target. Another shot, another kill. The third man realized what was happening and tried to dive for cover, but was faster. His third bullet found its mark just as the enemy fighter was bringing his RPG to bear. "What the hell are you shooting at?" demanded, spinning around to see what was targeting. Pointed toward the ridge. "RPG team, sir. They had us dead to rights." Looked up and saw the 3 bodies sprawled among the rocks. He realized immediately how close they'd come to disaster. If hadn't spotted those fighters, Team 7 would have been wiped out before they even knew what hit them. But now their position was compromised. The shots would have alerted every enemy fighter in the area. Already, could see movement in the village below as the armed men began advancing toward their position. "Time to go," shouted. "Fighting withdrawal to the secondary extraction point." Team 7 began moving immediately, using fire and movement tactics to withdraw from their exposed position. Provided covering fire with his rifle while the others moved, then sprinted to catch up when they'd found new cover. The Taliban fighters were good, but they weren't SEALs. They advanced in groups, making themselves targets for precision shooting. Each shot he took found its mark, and each target that fell made the others more cautious. But there were still too many of them, and they knew the terrain better than the American forces. Could see that they were being herded toward a natural where the enemy could mass their forces for a final assault. "Foster, get on the radio," ordered. "Tell base we need immediate extraction and close air support." Foster was already working his equipment. "Base, this is Team 7. We are in contact with superior enemy forces and need immediate assistance. Grid coordinates follows." As they moved through the rocky terrain, continued to provide accurate fire whenever targets presented themselves. His training was paying off, but he was beginning to understand the difference between shooting at paper targets and shooting at human beings who were shooting back. The enemy fire was getting more accurate as they closed the distance. Bullets whined off rocks around the SEAL's positions and could hear the distinctive crack of rounds passing close to his head. Called out, "We need you to slow them down. Can you hit that machine gun position?" Looked where was pointing. About 600 meters away, a Taliban fighter had set up a heavy machine gun behind a stone wall. The weapon was raking their position with automatic fire, making it nearly impossible for the team to move. It was a difficult shot. The target was partially concealed and would have to expose himself to get a clear angle. But if that machine gun wasn't silenced, Team 7 wouldn't make it to the extraction point. Found a stable firing position and studied the target through his scope. He could see just enough of the gunner to make the shot, but he'd have to time it perfectly. The man was firing in short bursts, then ducking back behind cover. Waited for the pattern to repeat itself. When the gunner popped up to fire again, was ready. His shot took the man in the head, and the machine gun fell silent. "Outstanding shooting," called out. "That bought us some breathing room." But wasn't celebrating. Through his scope, he could see more fighters moving to replace the machine gunner, and in the distance, he could hear the sound of vehicles approaching. The convoy that Base had warned them about was getting closer. Team 7 continued their fighting withdrawal, but could see that was starting to look worried. They were running out of ammunition, and the enemy seemed to have an endless supply of reinforcements. That's when noticed something that made his blood run cold. Among the advancing Taliban fighters, he spotted someone who definitely didn't belong. A man in different clothing, carrying equipment that looked far more advanced than the AK-47s and RPGs the other fighters were using. Through his scope, could see the man clearly. Caucasian features, military-style gear, and what looked like a high-tech sniper rifle. This wasn't a local Taliban fighter. This was a foreign advisor, possibly Russian or European, and he was setting up a sniper position that would give him a clear shot at Team 7. Realized that they weren't just fighting local insurgents anymore. Someone with serious training and equipment was hunting them, and that changed everything about their situation. The foreign sniper was setting up his rifle with the calm precision of someone who had done this many times before. Watched through his scope as the man adjusted his weapon and began scanning for targets. Even from 800 meters away, could tell this wasn't an amateur. The way he moved, the quality of his equipment, everything suggested serious military training. Was coordinating the team's withdrawal when grabbed his arm. "Sir, we've got a bigger problem. Professional sniper, 11 o'clock, about 800 meters out. He's not Taliban." Looked through his binoculars in the direction indicated. It took him a moment to spot the figure, but when he did, his expression grew grim. "Russian. Can't tell for sure, but definitely not local. His equipment is too good, and he moves like special forces." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Team 7 was caught between advancing Taliban fighters and a professional sniper who could pick them off one by one from long range. The convoy they'd been warned about was getting closer, and their ammunition was running low. Foster's radio crackled again. "Team 7, this is Base. Air support is 20 minutes out. Can you hold your position?" Looked at his men. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours given their current situation. They were outnumbered and about to be surrounded. But Navy SEALs didn't give up, no matter how bad things looked. "Negative, Base. We're moving to alternate extraction site Alpha. Have the birds meet us there." Williams was checking his ammunition. "I'm down to 3 magazines." Nodded grimly. "Same here, this is going to be close." The Taliban fighters were advancing more cautiously now, having learned to respect the accuracy of his rifle. But they were still coming, and their numbers seemed to grow with each passing minute. Could count at least 30 fighters moving through the rocks below them. "Can you take out that sniper?" asked. Studied the target through his scope. The foreign sniper had found an excellent position with good cover and clear sight lines. Taking him out would require exposing himself to return fire, and at that range, one mistake would be fatal. "I can try, sir, but he's in a strong position. If I miss, he'll know exactly where I am." "We can't leave him there. He'll pick us apart during the withdrawal." New was right. The enemy sniper was the most dangerous threat they faced. Local fighters with AK-47s were one thing, but a trained sniper with modern equipment could end their mission permanently. Found the best firing position available and settled in behind his rifle. Through his scope, he could see the enemy sniper scanning their area, searching for targets. The man's rifle was pointed in their general direction, and realized he had very little time before he was spotted. The distance was challenging but manageable. What made the shot difficult was the angle and the fact that his target was partially concealed behind rocky cover. Would have to wait for the perfect moment when the sniper exposed enough of himself to present a clear target. Controlled his breathing and found his natural point of aim. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, "Patience, Alex. The hunter who waits always defeats the hunter who rushes." Through his scope, watched the enemy sniper shift position slightly. For just a moment, the man's torso was visible above his cover, took up the slack in his trigger and prepared to fire. But something made him hesitate. A movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention, and he shifted his scope slightly to investigate. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. Was moving between cover points about 50 meters away, completely unaware that he was about to cross directly into the enemy sniper's sight line. The foreign marksman had spotted the movement and was swinging his rifle to track. Had a split second to make a decision. Take the shot he'd planned on the sniper's body, or try for a more difficult shot that might save life immediately. Shifted his aim to the enemy sniper's rifle scope. It was an incredibly difficult shot at that distance, trying to hit a target only a few inches wide. But if he could shatter the scope, it would temporarily blind the sniper and give time to reach cover. Fired. 800 meters away, the enemy sniper's scope exploded in a shower of glass and metal fragments. The man jerked backward, clutching his face, his rifle useless without its optical sight. "Get down," shouted, and the explosives expert dove behind the nearest rock just as the blinded sniper fired wildly in his direction. Had been watching the exchange through his binoculars. "Incredible shot. How did you even think to try that?" Was already working the bolt on his rifle, chambering another round. He was about to take out. "I had to try something." But there was no time to celebrate. The Taliban fighters had used the distraction to advance closer to Team 7's position. Could see muzzle flashes from at least a dozen different weapons, and the incoming fire was getting more accurate. "Time to move," ordered. "Give us covering fire." Team 7 began leapfrogging between cover points, with providing precision fire to keep the enemy fighters' heads down. Each shot had to count because he was running low on ammunition. As they moved through the rocky terrain, noticed something that worried him. The Taliban fighters weren't just advancing randomly. They were moving in a coordinated pattern, trying to herd Team 7 toward a specific area. It looked like they were being driven into a trap. "Sir," called out to, "they're trying to push us toward that cluster of rocks at 2 o'clock. I think it's an ambush." Looked in the direction indicated and saw what he meant. The terrain formed a natural funnel that would channel them into a killing zone. If they continued on their current path, they'd be walking into a crossfire. "Alternative route?" asked. Studied the terrain through his scope. There was another path that would take them around the ambush site, but it would require crossing an open area where they'd be exposed to fire from multiple directions. "We can go left around that ridge, but we'll be in the open for about 200 meters. They'll have clear shots at us." Weighed their options. Walk into a prepared ambush or risk crossing open ground under fire. Neither choice was good, but at least in the open they'd have a chance to use their speed and training. "We go left. I need you to suppress anyone who tries to engage us during the crossing." Foster was still working his radio, trying to get an update on their air support. "Base says the birds are 15 minutes out, but they're having trouble with the terrain. Extraction site might need to be changed." 15 minutes still felt like an eternity. Team 7 had been in continuous contact with enemy forces for over an hour, and fatigue was starting to set in. Could feel the weight of his equipment more heavily now, and his hands were beginning to shake slightly from adrenaline and exertion. "Ready?" asked his team. Each man checked his weapon and nodded. They'd trained for situations like this countless times, but training couldn't fully prepare anyone for the reality of being hunted through hostile terrain by superior numbers. "Go!" Team 7 broke cover and began sprinting across the open ground. Immediately, gunfire erupted from multiple positions as Taliban fighters tried to cut them down. Ran with his rifle ready, looking for targets to engage while moving at full speed. A fighter popped up from behind a boulder about 300 meters away, his AK-47 tracking toward Williams. Didn't even slow down as he brought his rifle up and fired from a standing position. The shot took the fighter's center mass, and he disappeared back behind his cover. Stumbled but kept running. "I'm hit," he called out, but he didn't stop moving. Williams immediately angled toward to provide medical attention, but the explosives expert waved him off. "Keep moving. It's just a graze." Could see blood on his arm, but the man was right. They couldn't stop in the open to treat wounds. They had to reach cover first. More fighters appeared along their route, but was ready for them. His training had taught him to shoot accurately while moving, and he was putting those skills to the test now. Each shot had to be perfect because he didn't have ammunition to waste. Team 7 reached the far side of the open area and dove behind a series of large rocks. Everyone was breathing hard, but they'd made it across without losing anyone. His wound was bleeding but not serious. "Nice shooting back there," Williams told as he quickly bandaged his arm. "I counted at least 4 targets you hit while running." Nodded but didn't feel like celebrating. They were still outnumbered and surrounded, and his ammunition was getting critically low. He had maybe 10 rounds left, and each one had to count. Foster was back on his radio. "Base, this is Team 7. We need that air support now. We're taking heavy casualties and running low on ammunition." The response was immediate but not what they wanted to hear. "Team 7, be advised that air support is encountering heavy ground fire. They're having difficulty reaching your position." His jaw tightened. The Taliban must have anti-aircraft weapons in the area, which explained why the helicopters were having trouble. Team 7 was truly on their own now. That's when spotted something that made his blood run cold. The foreign sniper had found a new position and was setting up again with a backup rifle. Even without his primary scope, the man was still dangerous, and he was positioning himself for a clear shot at Team 7's location. But that wasn't the worst part. Could see through his scope that the sniper wasn't alone anymore. He'd been joined by at least 2 other foreign fighters with similar equipment. What had started as a routine reconnaissance mission was turning into something much larger and more dangerous. "Sir," said quietly too, "we've got 3 foreign advisors with sniper rifles setting up positions around us. This isn't just Taliban anymore." Looked through his binoculars and saw what was talking about. Professional equipment, coordinated movements, advanced tactics. Someone had been expecting Team 7 to be in this area, and they'd prepared accordingly. This was a setup, realized. Intelligence was wrong. This wasn't a routine patrol area. Someone wanted us here. The implications were disturbing. If their mission had been compromised from the beginning, then someone with access to classified information had betrayed them. Team 7 wasn't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting to get home with information about a security breach that went much deeper than a simple Taliban ambush. Was scanning the area with his rifle when he spotted movement that made him freeze. Among the rocks about 600 meters away, he could see someone in American military gear. At first, he thought it might be another SEAL team coming to assist them. But as he focused his scope on the figure, realized something was very wrong. The person was moving with the Taliban fighters, not engaging them. And the equipment, while American in origin, was being carried by someone who definitely wasn't American military. His blood ran cold as he recognized what he was looking at. Someone in stolen or captured American gear was working with the enemy forces. The betrayal wasn't just in the intelligence that had led them into this trap. There was an active collaborator in the field. "Lieutenant," whispered urgently, "we've got a bigger problem than foreign advisors. Someone in American gear is coordinating with the Taliban fighters, about 600 meters northwest of our position." Took the binoculars and looked where indicated. When he saw what was talking about, his face went white. In all his years of military service, the idea of betrayal by fellow Americans was something he'd never seriously considered. But the evidence was right there in front of him. "Can you identify him?" asked. Studied the figure through his scope. The distance and angle made it difficult to see facial features clearly, but something about the way the person moved was familiar. Had seen that walk before, that particular way of carrying equipment. Then the person turned slightly and got a partial profile view through his scope. What he saw made his hands tremble slightly on his rifle. The face was familiar, very familiar. It was someone recognized from their base, someone who had access to mission briefings and intelligence reports. Someone who would have known exactly where Team 7 was going to be and when they'd be there. Found himself facing an impossible situation. He had a clear shot at someone who was obviously working with enemy forces. But taking that shot would mean killing another American, even if that American had betrayed everything they'd sworn to protect. His finger found the trigger but hesitated. Once he pulled that trigger, there would be no going back. No chance to question the target, no opportunity to understand how deep the betrayal went or who else might be involved. But while hesitated, the collaborator was pointing in Team 7's direction and speaking urgently to the Taliban fighters around him. Whatever he was telling them, it was giving the enemy crucial information about SEAL tactics and capabilities. Realized he was out of time. Every second he waited was another second for the enemy to gain a tactical advantage that could get his teammates killed. The man in American gear had made his choice when he decided to work with the Taliban, now had to make his. His finger tightened on the trigger as he watched the American collaborator continue to brief the Taliban fighters. Through his scope, he could see the man pointing toward different positions, obviously sharing tactical information about SEAL operations and capabilities. Every word coming from that traitor's mouth was putting Team 7 at greater risk. The moral weight of what he was about to do pressed down on like a physical force. This wasn't just another enemy fighter. This was someone who had sworn the same oath had sworn, someone who had been trusted with American lives and American secrets. But that same person had chosen to betray everything they'd promised to protect. Took a deep breath and centered his crosshairs on the target. At 600 meters, it would be a challenging but manageable shot. His rifle was zeroed perfectly, and there was minimal wind. From a purely technical standpoint, it was well within his capabilities. But as his finger began to apply pressure to the trigger, something unexpected happened. The collaborator suddenly looked up and seemed to stare directly at its position. For a moment, their eyes met across the battlefield and saw recognition in the other man's face. The traitor knew had spotted him, and worse, could see the man reaching for something on his belt, a radio. He was about to call in the exact location of Team 7's position to enemy forces. Didn't hesitate anymore. His rifle cracked once, and 600 meters away, the American collaborator dropped to the ground. The Taliban fighters around him scattered, confused by the sudden death of their advisor. "What did you just shoot at?" demanded, swinging his binoculars towards target area. "The collaborator, sir. He was about to radio our position to enemy forces." Studied the scene through his binoculars. He could see the body in American gear lying motionless among the rocks, and the Taliban fighters moving away from the area in obvious confusion. "You're sure he was working with them?" "Yes, sir. I watched him briefing them on our tactics for several minutes. He was pointing out our positions and explaining how we operate." His face was grim as he processed this information. A security breach this serious would have implications far beyond their current firefight. If there was one collaborator, there might be others. And if enemy forces had detailed intelligence on SEAL operations, then every American unit in the region could be at risk. Foster's radio crackled to life again. "Team 7, this is base. Air support is finally inbound. ETA 5 minutes. Prep for extraction." 5 minutes. Team 7 just had to hold their position for 5 more minutes, and they'd be out of this nightmare. But could see that the enemy forces weren't going to make it easy for them. The death of their American advisor had disrupted the Taliban attack, but it hadn't stopped it. If anything, the fighters seemed more determined now, advancing with reckless aggression that suggested they were under orders to prevent Team 7 from escaping. "They really don't want us to get out of here alive," Williams observed as he treated Swooned. "Makes you wonder what else they're trying to hide." was scanning the battlefield with his rifle when he spotted more movement. The three foreign snipers were repositioning again, trying to establish crossfire positions that would make the helicopter extraction impossible. If they succeeded, Team 7 would be trapped even after air support arrived. "Sir, those foreign advisors are setting up to engage the helicopters. They're moving to positions that will give them clear shots at the landing zone." Looked through his binoculars and saw what meant. The enemy snipers were spreading out to cover all the possible helicopter approach routes. Even if the aircraft made it through the ground fire, they'd face precision rifle fire from multiple directions during landing and takeoff. "Can you take them out?" Checked his ammunition. He had 8 rounds left, 3 targets at various ranges, all of them professional soldiers with excellent cover and equipment. The odds weren't good, but they were the only chance Team 7 had. "I can try, sir, but I'm getting low on ammo. If I miss, we're in serious trouble." "Then don't miss." Found a stable firing position and began studying his targets. The first sniper was about 700 meters away, positioned behind a large boulder with excellent cover. Could see just a small portion of the man's shoulder and part of his rifle barrel. The second target was closer, maybe 500 meters, but in an elevated position that would be difficult to reach with a direct shot. Would have to use a technique called elevation compensation, aiming higher to account for the upward angle. The third sniper was the furthest away, nearly 900 meters, but he was in the most exposed position. If could reach him at all, it would be the easiest shot of the 3. Decided to start with the closest target and work his way out. He settled in behind his rifle and controlled his breathing, just as he'd been taught in training, and just as his grandfather had shown him during those long afternoons of meditation. The first shot was the most critical. If he missed or only wounded his target, all 3 snipers would know his position and would concentrate their fire on him. Had to make this count. Through his scope, could see the enemy sniper adjusting his own rifle, preparing to engage the incoming helicopters. The man was completely focused on the sky, unaware that he was being targeted from below. His crosshairs settled on the small portion of the sniper's torso that was visible above his cover. It wasn't much of a target, but it was enough. His finger found the trigger and began applying pressure slowly and steadily. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and 500 meters away, the enemy sniper slumped forward over his weapon. Didn't wait to confirm the kill. He was already working the bolt and shifting to his second target. The elevated sniper had heard shot and was scanning the area below, trying to locate the source of the gunfire. Had to take this shot quickly before the man spotted his muzzle flash. Aimed higher to compensate for the upward angle and fired again. This shot was more challenging, but his training had prepared him for exactly this type of situation. The bullet found its mark, and the second enemy sniper disappeared from view. 2 down, 1 to go. But the third target was the most difficult, nearly 900 meters away at the extreme edge of effective range. Even worse, the distant sniper had now figured out where was shooting from and was bringing his own rifle to bear. Found himself in a classic sniper duel. 2 marksmen, both with lethal accuracy, both trying to kill the other before being killed themselves. At this range, whoever fired first would have a significant advantage. Scope settled on his target just as he saw the distant muzzle flash of the enemy rifle. Both snipers fired at almost the same instant. Felt the enemy bullet pass close enough to his head that he could hear the supersonic crack it made in the air. A few inches to the left, and the mission would have ended very differently. But shot was true. Even at 900 meters, his bullet found its target, and the third enemy sniper fell silent. "Outstanding shooting," called out. "That cleared the way for our extraction." Was reloading his rifle when he heard the sound they'd all been waiting for. The distinctive thump of helicopter rotors echoing off the mountainside. Their ride home was finally arriving. But the Taliban fighters weren't giving up. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as enemy forces tried to prevent the helicopter from landing. Tracer rounds streaked through the air and could see RPG teams maneuvering for shots at the aircraft. "Cover the LZ," ordered. "Don't let them get close to our birds." Team 7 spread out and began engaging any enemy forces that threatened the landing zone. Picked off RPG teams and machine gunners with the precision that had saved their lives multiple times during this mission. The first helicopter came in fast and low, its door gunners laying down suppressive fire as it approached the landing zone. But as it flared to land, spotted something that made his blood freeze. Another foreign advisor had appeared on a ridge overlooking the landing zone. This one carried a shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile, the kind of weapon that could bring down a helicopter with a single shot. Swung his rifle toward the new threat, but he was down to his last few rounds. At this range, with the helicopter in immediate danger, he would have only one chance to make the shot. The enemy fighter was shouldering his missile launcher, tracking the incoming helicopter. In seconds, he would fire, and Team 7's extraction would become a death trap. Crosshairs found their target just as the man's finger tightened on the missile launcher's trigger. For a split second, could see the enemy's face clearly through his scope. Another foreign advisor, another professional soldier being paid to kill Americans. His final shot rang out across the battlefield. 900 meters away, the anti-aircraft missile launched harmlessly into the air as its operator fell backward, dead before he hit the ground. The missile streaked overhead, missing the helicopter by hundreds of meters before exploding harmlessly against the mountainside. Williams shouted over the noise of the helicopter, "Get to the bird now." Team 7 sprinted toward the helicopter as its crew chiefs provided covering fire. His rifle was empty now, but he'd done what he needed to do. The extraction zone was clear and his teammates were safe. As they climbed aboard the helicopter, looked back at the battlefield they were leaving behind. Somewhere in those rocks lay the body of an American soldier who had betrayed his country for money or ideology. That betrayal had nearly cost 7 good men their lives. The helicopter lifted off and banked away from the valley, climbing rapidly to get out of range of small arms fire. As the Afghan landscape fell away below them, finally allowed himself to relax slightly. "Hell of a first mission, rookie," said, wincing as he adjusted his wounded arm. "You saved our asses more times than I can count." Looked at with new respect. "That shooting was some of the finest I've ever seen under combat conditions. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Thought about his grandfather, about all those hours of meditation and breathing exercises that had taught him to remain calm under pressure. About the hunting trips where he'd learned to read wind and distance. About the countless hours on the range, perfecting his technique. "Just good training, sir, and good teammates to fight alongside." Williams was already on the radio, reporting their situation to base. "Base, this is Team 7. All personnel accounted for. We have intelligence on enemy foreign advisors and possible security breach. Request immediate debrief upon arrival." Foster was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, trying to piece together what had happened. "Sir, I'm picking up chatter about other units making contact with foreign advisors. Whatever we stumbled into today, it's bigger than just our mission." Nodded grimly. The man had killed wasn't working alone. There was a network of collaborators and foreign fighters operating in the region, and Team 7 had just blown the cover on part of that operation. As the helicopter carried them toward safety, reflected on what had happened. He joined the Navy SEALs to serve his country and protect his fellow soldiers. Today, he'd been forced to kill a fellow American to do exactly that. It wasn't something he'd ever wanted to do, but it was something that had been necessary. The man he'd killed had made his choice when he decided to work with enemy forces, had simply made sure that choice didn't cost any more American lives. "You did the right thing," said quietly, as if reading thoughts. "I know it wasn't easy, but you saved lives today. Both ours and probably a lot of other Americans who would have been targeted if that intelligence network had stayed operational." Nodded, but he knew the weight of what he'd done would stay with him for a long time. Killing enemy fighters was one thing. Killing a traitor who wore the same uniform was something entirely different. As they flew back to base, made a silent promise to himself. He would serve with honor, protect his teammates, and never forget the price of betrayal. And if he was ever faced with a similar choice, he would make the same decision again. Because that's what Navy SEALs did. They protected each other no matter the cost. The helicopter touched down at base 30 minutes later. As Team 7 climbed out, could see intelligence officers and senior commanders waiting for them. The debriefing was going to be long and thorough, and the information they'd gathered would have implications far beyond their single mission. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, Team 7 had made it home alive, and sometimes that was all that mattered. Slung his empty rifle over his shoulder and followed his teammates toward the debriefing room. Behind them, the helicopter's engines wound down, and the immediate danger was over. But knew that in a war like this, there was always another mission waiting. And next time, he'd be ready for whatever challenges came their way. Because he was no longer just the new guy on Team 7. He was a proven warrior who had earned his place among some of the finest soldiers in the world. And that single bullet he'd fired to save his teammates had proven that, when it mattered most, Alex would always choose honor over everything else.